Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Atrophy of Soul, and today we are here to talk about the only franchise worthy of being mentioned in the same breath with Devil May Cry, the masochistic, the visceral, the enthralling Ninja Gaiden. More specifically, we will be talking about what many consider to be the epitome of the franchise, Ninja Gaiden Black. What sets Ninja Gaiden apart from most other titles in the genre is its emphasis on player proficiency. The developers do not go out of their way to empower players for the sake of empowering them, but instead the game devs force players to become sufficiently adept at the mechanics by reacting efficiently to the scenarios that they are placed in. The designers respect players enough to place stringent expectations upon them. Since the protagonist of the series, Ryu Hayabusa, is described as a super ninja, players are expected to perform as a super ninja would in the face of incredible odds. This means that you must move, strike, evade, and defend with the skill of a ninja master against enemies who are sometimes frighteningly adept at reading your movements and reacting in kind. Every core design element implemented into Ninja Gaiden is meant to challenge the player, and while it is indeed true that the difficulty is unrelenting and unapologetic, it should also be emphasized that the challenge presented isn't at the player's expense, but at their behest. Ninja Gaiden is definitely tough, but it's also fair. If you find yourself being heavily overwhelmed consistently, then it is up to you to develop the dexterity to overcome the challenges that the developers have constructed. The game developers weren't afraid to painstakingly create combat scenarios that are varied and overwhelming, yet there is a persistent veneration for the player present throughout the entirety of the experience, which makes the scenarios feel that much more poignant. While other games would hesitate to place players into such dire circumstances, even toward their climaxes, the first chapter of Ninja Gaiden Black is a means of separating the strong from the weak, or in this case, the lazy from the driven. Players will be forced to do battle against hordes of unrelenting adversaries who will take advantage of every opportunity that they have to kill you, whilst in tandem teaching the player how to not only defend themselves, but also how to maneuver around and explore environments. As intricate as its combat mechanics may be, Ninja Gaiden Black is also an adventure game with various key items that must be collected, platforming challenges to overcome, and large maps to navigate. In addition to the myriads of imposing ninjas and fiends, there are also lesser enemies such as bats and ghostfish who simply exist to allow players to accumulate essence. Essence is one of the core elements at play in Ninja Gaiden Black as it affects both combat and upgrades. Essence is dropped after an enemy has been defeated. What's particularly interesting about the Essence system is that it works as a currency, much like the red orbs in Devil May Cry. However, it can also be used to refill health, magic, or in conjunction with charge attacks to produce ultimate techniques. Ultimate techniques themselves are focus attacks which allow Ryu to pull off extremely powerful attack animations that can't be interrupted by enemies. There is a balance that must be maintained when deciding how to use Essence. Do you simply absorb blue essence to refill your health, or should you use it to instantly perform an ultimate technique? Should you absorb the yellow essence to accumulate more currency, or should you use it to charge your attacks, forcing enemies to drop larger essence orbs, which are worth far more currency? The first chapter of Ninja Gaiden Black effortlessly introduces all of these concepts, punctuated by a boss battle that is as difficult as it is rewarding. In regards to the core combat mechanics, the player is equipped with a range of abilities that are as satisfying and impressive to watch as they are to pull off. The combat system here is solely focused on concision. Ryu is a master ninja, therefore dispatching of enemies should be vicious, yet swift. Players are initially only equipped with a sword and shurikens. Being forced to use such seemingly restrictive weapons from the outset teaches players to rely on Ryu's superhuman agility as a means of survival, as opposed to brute force. Abilities such as Ninja Run, Reverse Wind, and Wind Path allow Ryu to defend and reposition himself in the midst of mass melees, making for far more manageable and impressive combat scenarios for players to overcome. Even on the default difficulty settings, players are heavily punished for indolently button mashing, because the act of mashing buttons lackadaisically is a passive experience, one which takes little to no thought, skill, or fortitude. What the developers want is for players to be active participants in the systems that they've created, immersing players into the combat scenarios through smooth, responsive, and nuanced mechanics. In spite of its emphasis on pragmatism over style, each of the weapons in Ninja Gaiden come equipped with lengthy move lists that put even the Devil May Cry series to shame. While a large number of attacks does not necessarily mean an increase in mechanical depth, it is interesting to note that a franchise that solely focuses on efficiency is still able to provide such varied and lengthy move lists. While there is still plenty of room for experimentation, when a player decides to take a particular action, they are forced to commit to it. Unlike Devil May Cry, where just about any attack can be cancelled to regain your bearings, in Ninja Gaiden there is a certain risk that must be measured before committing to any action. Recovery frames are far more prominent in Ninja Gaiden, and deliberately so, because even though they may only last for fractions of a second, that's more than enough time for enemies to succeed at changing the tide of battle. There are certain ways that recovery frames can be cancelled, however, the most popular of which being the Shirtkin Cancel, which is when a player tosses a shuriken during the recovery frame of an animation in order to cancel it. However, these recovery frames are an integral component of the gameplay balance, making sure that players aren't rewarded for being thoughtless. What this equilibrium entails from a gameplay standpoint is players who will take measured approaches to combat scenarios, players who will weigh the pros and cons of certain attacks and abilities, and players who are intelligent and skilled, slowly being molded to fit into the role of a master ninja. The director of Ninja Gaiden Black, and Ninja Gaiden 2, Tomonobu Itagaki, was brash yet sincere when expressing his disdain for players who were unwilling to learn and adapt to the difficulty that his games provided, even going so far as to implement a casual-friendly difficulty into Ninja Gaiden Black called Ninja Dog Mode, which forced players to wear a purple ribbon through the entirety of the campaign, while giving them infinite talismans of rebirth, which allows players to instantly respawn after dying. Speaking directly about Ninja Dog Mode, Itagaki has stated, quote, "Those who want to play it on easy and expect to get things the easy way should not expect to be treated as equal." End quote. This bold approach to game design is one that the industry has been sorely lacking since Itagaki's departure from the franchise. There is an elegance about Ninja Gaiden that satiates the entirety of the experience, ranging from its core design philosophy all the way to its ingenious combat system. The interplay between the speed, fluidity, and layers of the mechanics, with the contextual mastery of the player, makes for a gameplay system that is almost second to none. Even after players have felt that they have mastered the default difficulties, the challenge is that the higher difficulties provide will force them to reassess their strategies and refine their skills even further. The higher difficulties in Ninja Gaiden Black do not simply increase the attack and hit power of enemies like most other video games would, but instead, the difficulty modes completely change the properties of the game itself. The features of enemy attacks are tweaked, enemy placement is altered, new enemies replace old ones, and brand new boss characters are implemented into scenes that were once completely void of any adversaries. The changes do not only affect the hostile NPCs, but also adjust how items are distributed, where weapons can be found, and how much essence players will need to accumulate in order to upgrade their abilities. Even Ryu's inventory is curtailed to make sure players cannot rely on health items to overcome challenges, and of course the enemy AI is more intelligent and aggressive, and to add insult to injury, bosses are supplied with minions, which add a new layer of strategy and difficulty to each of the boss encounters. The developers of Ninja Gaiden Black weren't merely sagacious, they were irreverent and unapologetic. It takes some talented individuals to not only create a gameplay system that is as layered and visceral as Ninja Gaiden's, but to also construct difficulty modes that continue to organically push players beyond the bounds of their abilities is a truly laudable achievement indeed. The design philosophy that drove every facet of this series forward is one that has been all but completely expunged from the industry at large. Besides franchises such as Dark Souls, certain Platinum Games, and Team Ninja's upcoming Nioh, video games on the whole seem to have lost the edge that the developers of Ninja Gaiden designed their masterpiece with. Even though the Soul series upholds certain elements of Ninja Gaiden's legacy, the mechanical integrity that players must absorb in order to become adept at Ninja Gaiden is far more nuanced and rewarding than anything found in the Souls games. This doesn't mean that the Soul series is lacking in mechanical complexity, but compared to Ninja Gaiden, it's shallow from a purely gameplay standpoint. Completing a Souls game is contingent upon perseverance, whereas completing a Ninja Gaiden title is all about dexterity. There are very few shortcuts for lazy players to take, as skills are evolved organically in Ninja Gaiden, with every death sustained and challenge overcome. Sadly, as the years have gone by, even the Ninja Gaiden franchise, much like its contemporary Devil May Cry, began to dilute itself for the sake of mass appeal. When franchise director Tomonobu Itagaki departed from Tecmo, the new team of developers really struggled to carry the series forward in subsequent entries. Notwithstanding, the latest entries in the franchise do not necessarily betray the spirit of Ninja Gaiden, but instead they reinterpreted it with mixed results. And if you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on that, you can watch my Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge review, which will be linked at the very end of this video. It is interesting how both Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry have mirrored one another's triumphs as well as failures. Once the epitome of the genre, they both fell victim to corporate greed and a disquieting obsession with mass appeal. While both franchises currently find themselves in precarious situations, there's no doubt that if the developers were to reintegrate the design philosophies and gameplay systems that made past titles such masterpieces, it'd be difficult to see how the genre wouldn't be reinvigorated by the return of these juggernauts. Currently, the hack and slash genre is admirably being kept alive through Platinum Games, but as talented and creative as Platinum are, their forays into the genre have yet to provide the level of mechanical mastery, intensity, and innovations of the DMC and Ninja Gaiden franchises respectively. Perhaps one day these sleeping giants will return and once again redefine the genre in ways many of us never thought possible. Until then, I urge each and every one of you to give these franchises a chance, especially if you are a gamer who loves to delve into mechanics and overcome challenges. With that said, what are your thoughts on the design philosophies behind the Ninja Gaiden series? Do you feel that the franchise is far too unforgiving? What do you think about the series creator Tomonobu Itagaki? Do you think that Platinum's upcoming Nier game will provide the genre with a much needed resuscitation? Whatever your thoughts are, be sure to comment below and let me know what you think. Once again, my name is Atrophy of Soul. Thank you very kindly for listening, and be sure to have yourselves a fine day.